All right. I think we're good. Dave, thanks for coming and hanging out.
For sure.
The Walmart gift card, the scammer or tax scammer guy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great story. And what we learned from that was the IRS doesn't call you first, apparently.
He also, side note, if anybody Indian IRS person calls you, they actually will tell you that the police are on their way right now.
Whoa.
To arrest you unless you provide
that definitely adds like
said Walmart gift card.
Yeah. I mean,
which I think is a regular police tactic, like that they call you before.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very odd.
Yeah.
They have way too much time on their hands.
Certainly.
But I'm sure they're making money. They wouldn't still be doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming, especially on short notice. I called you last night.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's part of me that thinks that you actually dreamed up this whole podcast last night.
Within a night? No.
Right before
Byron
you
can attest
me.
that I haven't. Like, we've been talking about this for about a couple. Yeah. Well, I'm just a poor planner. Yeah. We've actually been planning this episode 0 kind of test podcast for, I think, about 3 weeks, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've actually, so I guess jumping into it, the reason, one, usually I'm going to be interviewing a guest, but I actually asked you to come on to interview me a bit about this podcast. So it'll be a little bit different from the way that the other ones are happening. But yeah, so the way that this kind of got started was 5 years ago, 2014. September 2014, actually. I looked at the when I created the document for the idea in Google Drive. It was September 2014. And I had this idea of creating a documentary, which I had no idea what that would entail. And it was called Men of Faith. And it was about, look, I like knew a bunch of old guys that I really admired and mentored me. And I was just like,
so you're having exclusively old people.
No. It's not. Okay. It's turned into more of that. But like, there were these guys that just have mentored me since I was young.
Gotcha.
And not really necessarily. The one guy in episode 1, the guy coming up next, he is old. Sid.
I'm sure he'll be thrilled.
Yeah, he knows he's old. But he's also the most active man I think I've ever known. But yeah, so it's like, I know these men that have just really poured into my life, and they've got such stories, and they're not pastors. And that was important because my trajectory in life was to be a worship pastor, and that changed to many people, to most of my friends and family's surprise. And I went off into technology. But when I started kind of like looking at the men in my life that have been mentoring me, I noticed that they also kind of had a similar type of thing. They ended up not going into vocational ministry, but they, were businessmen. Sid's an excavator. Brody Walker, who's coming on hopefully in May. I hope you're coming. He is senior vice president of technology at First Security Bank. Like
sounds fancy.
He and his band were like a week from signing a record deal, and the lead singer's fiance, I think, was like, "It's me or the band."
Oh,
yeah, that had to be rough, right? Like exactly. Like it's like, well, anyway, I'll let him tell that story.
Yeah,
but he also opened up for Louis Giglio back in the day when Louis was like, just kind of starting out.
Yeah.
And so it's like I've got these men in my life that have great ups and downs in their stories, and just the thread of faith throughout it, and how they came to faith in Christ and continue to be men of faith. I wanted to document those stories. I wanted to document that wisdom. Because I'm like a lifetime learner, right? Like I'm always constantly trying to learn. And I want to learn from their failures and their successes, but I kind of wanted to share that.
So is this sort of like your aim is like the intersection of faith with like regular life, sort of? Since you're saying, yeah, I took a pivot. I went to the marketplace to accomplish stuff, and
yeah, kind of. It's more about like. I think Byron, you and I were talking about a little bit about this when we were talking about the podcast originally. Was like they have such interesting stories and such real stories of children dying and of divorce and of all these different things that like good Christians don't do a lot of times, but they're very real about like who they are and everything. I wanted transparency in this documentary. I wanted to show people like, hey, I struggle with mental illness, or I struggle with, all like pornography. I struggle with whatever it may be, because I think especially as men, like we kind of like keep that to ourselves sometimes. And I want to be very real and transparent about that. Authenticity, I think, is like sometimes kind of a word that the church has stolen, and it's become kind of a facade. Yeah.
Why do you think it is that because ideally church would be the safest place to kind of live that transparency? Why do you think that what I'm hearing, kind of the underlying thing that you're talking about, is we don't feel like we can do that. So I want to these stories are actually unique because it's uncommon for people to actually be transparent. Like, what do you think that's to be attributed to?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, one is the culture, right? Like American culture, you kind of want to like have the dream. You want to put off this facade that everything's cool on the outside. I don't really have time or energy to devote to that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know like when I was on the path of becoming a full-time worship pastor, that's what I wanted to do. I just kept coming to this place that's like definitely not it's a sinful place, but it's like I can't be bothered with stupid people that leave anonymous notes on Monday mornings after a worship service. Like I just can't be bothered with that. I don't have the time for that. And there's definitely some pride and selfishness in there about that. Like I should have empathy but I was just like, that's not where I want my energy or focus to go. And I think that burnt me out a lot. And I think the pastors, not at where we are now at Crossgate, but the pastors before that I was at Harrisburg and Jonesboro a bit, were like, yeah, but you gotta play to that a bit. And I'm like, but why? Like, do we really have to? Like, if the leadership is like, yeah, this is the right direction, it's like, we've already got 2 hymns, or like we keep getting notes about a 3rd hymn, like it's just like stuff like that. And I'm just like, and plus it's anonymous. Like, I don't know. It's stuff like that I think like I just kept being told you just had to play to that. So
you feel like if
I had to put on this.
If you play by the rules like that closely, then you can't even really be yourself, because you kind of have to always play the game.
And that wasn't me. I just want to be like, no, thanks anyway though. But that comes off as like harsh. But it's like it's my job to do that.
Do you think it's harsh, or do you think that we're soft?
No, I think most pastors nowadays are pretty like soft. I think most pastors are but I think you have to be, right? Like if you just pissed everybody off, you're not going to have a job for a while. Like you do have to know how to work with everyone, but that's got to be exhausting, right? Like that's what I'm saying. Well, like that's people get burnt out really quickly doing that.
That's where I'm feeling the tension though, in what you're talking about. Is this longing for some sort of like authenticity, but not actually feeling your heart longs for it. I'd say it's actually the like Jesus way of community, but we don't actually feel the freedom or maybe the safety, or I think there's a couple of parameters we can throw. Yeah, we just don't feel like we can actually experience that. That was definitely been stolen from.
Yeah, that's what I was feeling, and it was like taking a piece of me that I refused to kind of let go. And what I found is in technology, I could lead a team and be a little bit harsh like I was, but still enable people to do their best work. And it just kind of pushed them. And so that's why I got into product management and technology and things like that. And so it's been great. Just the way that I'm built, the way that I think has been great for that. But yeah, so, but that was getting back to the podcast. Well, I guess the documentary that was 5 years ago, that I came and was like, okay, we'll do a documentary. I filled out like, I want to talk about business, marriage. I want to talk about these things and the thread of faith throughout them. I wrote a script. I got Sid to agree for me to come to his house, but then I didn't have any video equipment. And I was just like,
that makes a documentary tough.
Apparently you have to have video equipment, it turns out. So I was like, well, I don't know anybody with video equipment. And so I was just like, I'll just leave it. I'll come back to it. And every year it seemed to come back on my mind, but I was just kind of waiting and waiting. And then this past year, so I'm the kind of person that I start many things. I think you know that pretty well about me. And I like to start things. Like I've got a wood lathe that I used for all of 2 months making pins. And I haven't touched it since.
Pins?
Pins. I've made actual pins. You need to come out to the shop, man. I made a wand for Courtney. Well, I almost did. It broke. And anyway, but I haven't touched it since, right?
Yeah.
Well, like this December, I created a stream, and I was like, I want to start streaming on Twitch. I see all these people streaming, and it looks fun playing video games and streaming. So I did that for about 3 weeks. I got in a schedule and everything, man. Like I was like, this is great. And then I got like, I was like, yeah, whatever. I just kept pushing it aside. But then in February, we went to a men's conference that Crossgate was having and that our church was having. And the men's conference, I'm sitting there and I'm like, it was great. These men in our own community were sharing their stories very openly, very raw. And I was like, it took me back to the men of faith idea.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, this is it. Like the men in that room were just like, that's me. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know you struggled through that. Just watching your life, it looks like you are so like you have the perfect life, and you're telling me that you struggle with alcoholism. I struggle with that too. How do you get through it? And it was amazing, and it got me excited again. And then I was like, what if we streamed the Men of Faith? What if it wasn't a documentary, but like a podcast? The Joe Rogan podcast, by the way, I really love.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's great. He has people that come on that maybe differ from his opinion. And I was just like, what if we took the Joe Rogan podcast with the Men of Faith idea and we just did this?
So you're going to have Alex Jones on sometime?
I would love to have Alex Jones. I don't even know what we would talk about. That's the thing. You don't have to say anything.
No,
he could just start.
Wind him up.
You could just wind him up and start. It would
just
definitely
be 1 4 hour long.
Yeah, but it would be brilliant, right? Like
define brilliant.
Well, I mean,
entertaining.
To get people so worked up.
Oh yeah,
and to have literally, it's a polar divide, right? Like you love him or you hate him, and there is no in between. It seems.
Oh, certainly.
It is brilliant. He knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for how many years? I mean, like he knows what he's doing.
A couple decades at least.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted. Is like I want to bring kind of that Joe Rogan authenticity, that raw, real, these stories coming in and talk about our struggles as men. Maybe even have couples on, and Courtney, my wife, come in and just talk about marriage and stuff like that. Maybe do like on Father's Day, do like a little panel type thing of fathers. But I've got people kind of lined up through the end of the year already, 1 a month so far. But yeah, that's kind of what this is about. Is like I want to document these stories and these lives.
Okay, so I got like what you're actually gonna do. What's the motivation? What's the hope that you're like? What are you aiming to actually get done? Because Joe Rogan's podcast is kind of like, man, he's just sort of exploring all of these different.
Oh yeah, drugs,
topics. DMT,
like all crazy stuff.
But, I love it. It's super entertaining.
It's super entertaining.
I learn a lot.
Yeah,
but obviously,
you don't agree with everything in it.
Certainly not.
But like,
you're aiming for an entirely different thing.
I mean, that's the thing is, I like exploring different views on things. I'm not like, I think especially Christians tend to like shy away from science. It seems like we're kind of afraid to talk about science. Like sometimes I'll talk with Courtney about new technology that comes up, and Courtney's like, I don't know. That sounds real Mark of the Beast-ish. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, this is like a niche. She's like, no. Get that Elon Musk Neuralink stuff out of my face. I'm not doing that. But like, it's like sometimes we're afraid to talk about science sometimes. And I'm like, I love digging into science. I'm actually very interested in this. And then sometimes it's like, we're afraid to talk about certain topics in culture. I don't want to shy away from those. The motivation is like, let's dig in and talk about these situations that are happening, and talk about the Christian worldview and the threat of faith throughout it. J.D. Greer, the SBC's, Southern Baptist Convention president. There's a situation with the Southern SBC right now. Is like they have what is it, like there was a lot of scandals with like sex abuse and things, or sexual harassment in the church. And
I haven't heard.
And he came out and he was like, "This is wrong. We should change these things about the SBC right now." But then there were some executive SBC folks that were kind of like, "Well, calm down. Like, you're a little bit younger. We've been around a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't do that." And I'm like, "Well, that's interesting, because like I've read his paper. I know what he's talking about. I don't know why someone would oppose those things, but I'm like, I want to get those two dudes in the room and let's just talk about it."
So you want to recreate the Tim Pool plus
right
Twitter executives?
Twitter executives, yeah, when they were going after each other. Yeah, I mean, it's like we should be able to sit in a room and talk about these things, and talk about, even if we don't necessarily come to a conclusion at the end of the talk, we should be making progress towards
So just
something.
Starting the conversation itself.
Yeah,
I think really what you're hoping
and
for.
There's not just sharing these men's stories, but there's a guy that's writing a book. He's an ethicist for the SBC, and I don't want to just stay SBC, by the way. I want to make a point to, like, I want to get, there's a Methodist church is actually having the same type of sexual harassment problem right now too, and J.D. Greer has been very supportive of the Methodist Church and
Methodist churches, they're at a crazy potential turning point on a few issues.
Yeah. And I'd love to get somebody in from the Methodist Church, because I grew up in the Methodist Church, and so I'd love to get somebody in to talk about that. But I think another excuse me, I'm getting over being sick. I think another thing is I want to bring in this ethicist guy that's writing a book on artificial intelligence and the church's responsibility, of like, we won't just dig into the technology of it. Let's talk about what's the church's responsibility when automation makes all these people lose their jobs.
Yeah,
does the church what's our career advice to the kids nowadays? Because it's not the same as what it was 50 years ago or anything. Definitely. So I mean that, and I think at the end of it, the motivation is like, I want to document these things so that my 21-year-old brother can hear about how other men were going up and hear these stories. And so he kind of was like, if he's struggling with something, he can be like, "Oh, I'm not alone." And or if my 6-year-old son is growing up, he can watch these things and go, "Okay, I'm not alone. I'm not weird. I can push through this thing. I can resolve this thing." I just want to like document these things for other people, really.
What was it that like finally pushed you over the edge where you're like, something has to be done?
I think I'm
doing it.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, the thing that I realized was, like, once I started streaming, I picked up streaming, right, for like a month. And I was at that men's retreat, and it hit me. I was like, we could do a podcast. Because with a podcast, I just need like 2 microphones, a few cameras for like 3 different viewpoints, right? And that's it. And I was like, well, I've already got 1 camera. I don't really have great microphones, but I knew somebody that did. Byron was like, "Yeah, we got cameras and a setup right here." So I was like, well, let's just plug it in. Let's just record it, and we won't even do really any editing. Let's just, because about the rawness, right? Like, that's what we want it to be. And so like have somebody help with the camera shots. Byron was like, "Yeah, I can do that." Like, so I'm like, well, let's just do it then. Let's just see what happens. So that's definitely what episode 0 was about. Was one, just testing the setup, but then digging into about like what it was and everything. Yeah.
So tell us what you already hinted to, a couple of people that you've got lined up. What's coming down the pipe?
So we've got Sid Langley coming next month for the first episode. I'm really excited about that. And I think one of the points also I want to make is like, it's going to be, the conversation will be as long as it is. Mm-hmm. And then once the conversation's over, we'll turn the cameras off and that's it. Like, I don't know exactly how much time each episode's going to be, but I don't think it really matters as well. Like, as long as it's good content, right?
For sure.
So like Sid's coming on in April, and then in May, I'm trying to get Brody Walker to come on and to talk a bit. But I wanted to like record this first and send it to him so he knew what it was like. I keep hitting that camera. We'll have to reposition.
That's
that.
right. It's only
this is a test. This is why this is episode 0 right here. But then in June, there's a guy named Jim Tom Butler coming. He is a character.
Jim Tom, like one name?
Yeah. Jim Dash Tom. I think so.
So does Jim Tom have a middle name? I mean, it feels
no,
unnecessary.
I don't. But he will tell us. This guy's a character, man.
That's the thing I want.
I met him in Harrisburg.
That's what I want to know.
I will make sure. I will make sure
that
that gets to him for sure. Middle name. All right, great. But he is quite the character. I met him in Harrisburg. He was a deacon. Rededicated his life to the Lord on a mission trip to Ecuador. Came back on fire. Helped me start a nonprofit organization. It was awesome. But he's got quite a story. And then I've also got a friend of mine that was a missionary in Guatemala coming. He's now moved back to the States, and he's just got a great story. And then in August, I'm having Clint Rickett, who is a physical therapist and is like a great physical therapist here in the community. He is just like up and moving his family to Vanuatu, which is like a 12 by 24 mile island somewhere around Australia, and becoming missionaries. Like, and it's been a 10-year journey to get to that point. And I want to get in his mind a bit and be like, how did you get from there to here? And why, like, because he's a planner. He very much wants to keep things like, what gave you the peace to do that? To be like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave my physical therapy career, still take those skills with him to the island, but we're going to become missionaries as a family. And man, it's just a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And so he's going to leave, I think, in like September or October. So I'm like, why don't you come in August and let's talk about that before you go.
Is there ever going to be a Matt Scholl personal edition?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that my story will come out
sort of leak out through
the different episodes, especially when I talk to people like Sid that have been mentoring me since I was 12. And he was the first mentor in my life. And then Brody Walker, he's the guy that taught me how to lead worship. And so like, I think my story will come out through a lot of those stories whenever. And then my buddy from college that was a missionary in Ecuador, we'll definitely get into college stories, obviously.
It'll be a lengthy episode.
Yeah. It's going to be a good one for sure. But yeah, I think that I don't want to just sit and talk about me. Like, I want to turn on the cameras and I want to ask them and dig into their lives, and then share my story as it relates to that. Yeah, I think that's the right format.
Cool.
Or do a panel.
Is there anything else that the people need to know about? Are you calling it Men of Faith, or is that
Men
kind
of Faith?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what the intro image said.
And like an amoeba of an
It could definitely change.
Okay.
I'm bad at naming things.
The folks should know about Men of Faith before you call it good today. Episode 0.
No, we may explore some strange things. I mean, like, marijuana is becoming legal in a lot of places. We're definitely probably going to talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I had edibles. Was it last year on my work trip in Denver? It was legal. There was like people, right? Like, I tried it once.
Oh, you're going to freak some people out.
Oh, it's going to definitely freak some people out. And I think that's what I'm saying is, like, don't get freaked out. And, like, we're just exploring these topics. And, like, it was one time, and maybe it will happen again in the future. Like, it was a good time. It was me and a friend, and we were in a hotel room. Like, it wasn't, like, a weird thing. But I want to kind of talk about those things. I want to get out in front of those things.
Be an interesting thing.
Because
what does Jesus think about that?
Right.
When we really get down to it, where does he land on the issue?
And
that's
exactly
what we ought to be making our decisions based on. Yeah.
Exactly.
That'll be an interesting podcast.
And I want to get somebody like, I mean, I don't really mind about that, but I want to get somebody that does mind about it and is like, no. Okay, why? And so, like, we're going to explore some things that
I think that
the church doesn't necessarily talk about.
Will be very easy to find.
Oh, definitely, especially in like the Bible Belt, right? Yeah. So we're going to talk about a lot of things that will like be around that, and I don't think I don't want people to get thrown off by that.
Yeah.
Just know that we're going to explore it.
Just know what you're signing up for.
Just know what you're signing up for. And
Put
if you
on
don't
your
like
big boy
it,
pants
yeah, then I'm sorry. Skip past that episode. But yeah, it's all going to be good. It's going to be good content about faith, and what the Bible says, and how we're living that out, and being honest with each other to be like, oh, I do have a drink sometimes when I'm out with friends at dinner. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, but you can't say that though, right? Like,
it depends on where you are.
I also cuss out loud from time to time, not like in front of my kids, but
what?
I know. So like, I'm just bearing my soul right now. I think I'm getting it all out right now. This is the personal one, right? So I think there's sometimes that I feel like a terrible Christian, but I think I'm not alone. I think I'm alone.
Here's the beauty of what you're talking about, though, is I think this will be for better or for worse, this will be a very polarizing sort of podcast.
Yeah, probably.
In that, folks will either be so angered by it that they will just disengage completely,
maybe, yeah.
or the curiosity for the conversation, which is who you're targeting for anyway.
Yeah,
will like naturally draw folks who are.
Definitely. And not every episode is going to be like that. I mean, most episodes are going to be about the stories of those men that are coming on, or the couples or the panel or whoever. But I imagine in those stories, they're going to talk about like their drug abuse or something, you know? And it's like, tell me about that feeling, because like when I ate an edible, I didn't wake up the next morning and like, I want to do that every day. Yeah. But like, there are people that struggle with that, and like they put that above everything else in their life, right? Because like they're chasing that high, but that's not how I'm wired. And so it's like, I want to understand that, and I don't want to like feel like I have to put up this facade like, oh, I've never tried anything. I've always I don't do smoking because my biological father smoked, and it like really made me mad, and I can't do the whole. I have asthma.
Do you?
That's the worst excuse ever.
Do you think that the people who are like in your immediate circle, regular rhythm of life, are ready for these sort of conversations?
Oh, I have these conversations with them anyway. I guarantee you, the small group that I'm in with at church, and a bunch of them lead worship with me. They've had these conversations with me, and they're going to be like, I can't believe you're having these conversations publicly with other people on the internet
to see.
I'm pretty sure Courtney's going to think that as well, right? Like she's going to be like, she's probably just going to roll her eyes. But I've prepared her a little bit. I'm like, I'm not going to shy away. Like I just want to be honest. I want to be real about this and talk about some things that not everybody is comfortable talking about sometimes. And I think that's okay. Yeah.
So for folks who want to find out more info, where do they do that? Or is that information coming?
It is. No. So I've at menoffaithpodcast.com. That is the central source. It'll link you to the YouTube. There's a YouTube. There's a Twitter, and there's a Patreon. And so the Patreon is there. If you want to, there's like a $5, $10, and $20 a month. You can support the podcast. It's going to go towards equipment. It's not going to I'm going to put it all back into the podcast to kind of like have a setup for the podcast. So maybe we don't have to keep using Byron's equipment every time. And I mean,
Byron's like, no, it's so that you can pay me to use
that too. Equipment. Well, that's the thing too. I'm like, I want to be able to like pay Byron for his time and
I've
like,
lived in this world, Byron.
Get a little money for my time. Like that'd be great. We're also going to monetize. Like I'm going to break these things up into little clips on YouTube and put up the whole thing on YouTube and monetize those things. But anybody that wants to support us can do that on Patreon. But if you don't, that's fine. Like we've got a little rig here. We'll stick with this, Yeah. menoffaithpodcast.com is going to be the place to go, though.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you need to say to close us out?
I think that's it. I appreciate both of you guys' time.
So do you have anything that you're going to like wrap up with every time, or is it just going to be like, all right, it's over, go?
Yeah, it's pretty much over. I think it was a great episode. I think it was a great podcast.
We'll
great
know when
test.
we see it.
Well, that's the thing is like for people at home, we literally just we hit start recording and we just went.
We began our conversation checking microphones over IRS scammer stories.
Yes.
So
No, I appreciate both y'all's time. Cool. I think that's a wrap. Good job. Woo!